Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the binge factor.
Hey everyone, welcome to Feed Your Brand Center of Influence. I'm Tracy Hazard, and I have a great guest today, an exciting podcaster, Cami Guildner. And Cami has Extraordinary Women Radio. Doesn't that sound fun? And I've listened to some of the episodes, and there are some really extraordinary women. My absolute favorite one that was one of her more recents was Beth Comstock. And because of it, I'm buying Beth's book. So she was an executive at GE and NBC Universal, and an incredible interview. And what I love so much about what Cami does is she really brings this like sort of gentle personal side to these women. So she's bringing out not just how extraordinary they are in business and all of that, but she's also bringing out what kind of people they are. And Cami's a great storyteller. She's obviously a great connector. You'll hear that when you listen to her show. She's a success coach for women. She helps clients raise up their voice, their brand, their business so they can make an impact that they desire, right? It's not, let's just have an impact. Let's have a business. Let's have one that we care about, that we really are passionate about. She weaves soulful inspiration into mindful business strategies, helping her clients succeed in business and their worldly impact. With decades of leadership marketing, strategic planning, and business growth and expertise, Cami guides her clients to master their marketing, money, and mindset to raise up their business success and visibility. She's the founder and host of the award-winning Extraordinary Women Radio. That's a podcast featuring wildly successful, that's the part I love, wildly successful women living out loud in voice, vitality, and vigor. Extraordinary Women Radio was recently named the best business podcast, annual People's Choice Podcast Awards also, and has featured guests such as Elise Nelson, Agape, I can never say her last name. Stasinopoulos, thank you. Lisa Rankin, Tammy Simon, and many more. And of course, Beth Comstock, as I pointed out. So Cami also has Extraordinary Women Connect, which is a series of intimate events. And I hope we'll get to talk about her events while we're doing this. So we're going to make a point of it. And she's the best-selling author of Fire Dancer, Your Spiral Journey to a Life of Passion and Purpose. And something called Pony Pondering Inspiration Cards, which as you listen to her show, you'll find out that she is an avid horsewoman of all kinds. So Cami, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to talk about your podcast.
Oh, Tracy, thank you so much. I am so honored to be here on your show with you. It's just such a blessing. Thank you.
Did you ever imagine that the podcast would be as successful as it is when you set out to start it?
No, I would have never even thought about being a podcaster. If you would have asked me 10 years ago and told me that I was going to be a podcaster, 10 years from now, I would have said, you're crazy. That's just not in the cards for me. And it's just something I have such a great passion for. I love my show. I love getting to speak to so many extraordinary women. It's a lot of fun.
Isn't that the way? It's like, that I wish that I could get that across to aspiring podcasters or aspiring people who want to get their voice out there, especially women who are just get started, because it's astounding how amazing it is.
It is. And the women that say yes, I mean, some of the women that I've gotten to interview, I mean, Beth Comstock is a great example, right? When I reached out to Beth, I literally emailed her off of her page, her website. And she responded back, yes, I'll do an interview with you. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, isn't that the way? And I keep telling people I've never been turned down for an interview. I've had people who maybe needed to wait some time to schedule it or other things, but I've never been turned down. Yes. So the power of asking, right? That it's so empowering when that happens again and again and again. You're like, nothing's out of reach at that point.
And it's such a good life lesson, right? To just go out and ask and put yourself out there. because when we do that, just great things happen for us.
Well, tell everyone the story about how you got started with Extraordinary Women Radio. Extraordinary Women Radio. Boy, that's hard to say when you say it fast.
Right, it is.
You know what?
You have to practice it a little bit.
Yeah. How'd you get into it? What made you start it? What was the impetus for that?
So about 5 years ago, I started my Extraordinary Women Connect events. And that originally was very much about, I was meeting such amazing women all the time. And I was always saying to one woman to another, you need to meet this woman. She's amazing. So I was always connecting one great woman to another. And that concept is what started my Extraordinary Women Connect events. And at the same time I launched that, I did 5 interviews with some pretty cool women that I knew. And I did it, and it was like, that was really fun. And so I was doing it literally just capturing. And I mean, I was not podcasting at that point. I captured the audio. I found a way to upload it somewhere, and I shared it with people. And I thought, wow, that was really a lot of fun. But I was also in this space where I was about 5 years into my business, and it was really starting to grow fast. And so the growth trajectory of my business at that point really didn't make sense for me to be trying to start a podcast in the mix of it. So I actually pulled back from it. My events continued and still continue today. And so I'll be 3 years in March on my podcast. And, so I just got to this place where it was like, I think now is the time to really start bringing the podcast back. And because I always had this desire, I had so much fun with those interviews that I wanted to bring that back into my business. And it was the perfect timing to come back into it.
Love that. What's some interesting things that has happened to you because of the podcast, because of the interviews?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the most beautiful things is some of the partnerships that I've been able to create over the course of my podcast. And one of the very early on podcasts, or the early on partnerships that I was able to get was the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame. And so the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame has been inducting women into this, into their Hall of Fame. And they have some like amazing, amazing women. And so very early on, I got to interview a former First Lady of the state of Colorado, an astronaut, and so there's just been some really intriguing women that have come through the channels of federal judge. So right now we're getting ready to do the 2020 inductees. There's 6 women that I'll be interviewing in early 2020 that are being inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame. So it's fun to hear their stories.
That's so cool. So now it just hit me because Cammie and I were talking about this before. We weren't really sure how the invitation had been extended to her. It's the dames.
Oh, it's Megan.
That's
Gunter.
what it just, yeah. It's just Megan Guildner at the dames, because when you said Colorado, all of a sudden it hit me. That's how I remember. That's why your name's so familiar to me, and that's where I first met you. So,
that's awesome.
So yeah, it was a virtual introduction, but still.
Leave it to Megan. She's a connector too, right? She's another one saying, you need to meet this woman and you need to meet that woman. So that totally makes sense.
So, but no, yeah, the minute you said Colorado, I was like, now it comes to me, because, this is the thing. I interview so many people, and so do you. So it gets in this blur of, how did I ask you to interview? Where could it come from? LinkedIn? It could have come from a referral. But unless we both remember the story, or I made a note about it somewhere, it's that kind of like, it'll come to me. But yeah, so that's so wonderful that it is those connections that lead to more interesting partnerships, more interesting stories. And I think that and maybe you're finding this too, that it also is coming into being a better advisor to my clients.
Oh,
so
totally.
I'm a better coach. I'm a better mentor because I have more stories that aren't my own that I'm able to tap into.
We learned so much. We learned so much. And I think one of the things that I have learned over the course of, I just did my, the 130th interview. I think it's what I just posted today. And one of the things I have learned over the course of getting to interview some just, people that I would have never have imagined, right, is that there's always stories. I mean, nobody's line is just straight and easy, right? Nobody just gets there. And And every single one of the women is like, when you ask them the question, how does fear show up for you? And when does it show up for you? And they're like, it shows up for me every day. And, they can be women running some of the largest corporations. They can, it's just a truth that to be able to hear women that are so successful be vulnerable and share their stories, that their journey there's been bumps along the way. And that for me, in my own business helps me see, okay, yes, our journeys are never straight. And certainly for my clients, to help them, to assure them that, yeah, your journey is not going to be straight, but guess what? You're every time you're stepping forward into it, just like these other amazing women, you're growing, you're stretching.
Well, speaking of fear,
Yes.
so was there any kind of fears or things that held you back from getting
Totally.
started in podcasting? What were they? And
Well, it's just your voice, right? I mean, it's like when you start putting your voice out there, it is one of those sorts of things where you're like, oh God, I think when I was first doing my intro, I think I must have re-recorded that intro 50 times before I was like, okay, that's a good one. And you just get to the point where you be you and you show up. And that's the beautiful part about podcasting is it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't, and we get to be perfectly imperfect, right? There's this space.
Well, we have to embrace that first, right?
Exactly. And exactly. We do have to learn to embrace that. And my fear was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use the wrong words, or I'm going to, sound silly, or whatever that looks like. And so there was a big fear around that.
So you're not alone, Cami. There's a lot of, and I would say it's more women than men, like at a significant number of the people that I've coached, the clients that we have here. And there are more women than men who struggle with their very first intro episode. It's not that just the intro recording, but the intro episode, that first thing that they will re-record it and re-record it and re-record it, actually to the point at which it's no longer good, that they've re-recorded it so many times because it's now, the power of it's gone, right? The energy. And so my job is usually to call them up and go, hey, I know you agonized over this. So early on, we came to this practice of suggesting and recommending to our clients that they first do an interview episode versus their intro episodes. So they don't start in linear order.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So they go and they do an interview because I'm going to show up for you. I'm going to have energy. It's going to be different talking to you in an interview situation, and the pressure's on. And of course, pick someone for your very first interview who's like, well.
Good friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Pick someone well. It doesn't have to be your absolute third episode. You can move them around in the schedule, but do it that way so that you're like, if the recording is terrible, they're not going to go, oh my gosh, I'm never going to redo that with you. You don't want that kind of pressure on yourself.
Right.
And so that's the first thing. The second one is then you do your first solo cast if you're going to do those type of shows where you're just talking about like your most asked question or your most important topic, the key to whatever it is that you do that makes you uniquely you. And you do that second because you could talk about that for days on end, right? And then you go back and do the intro episode because now, and we follow 3 questions that we if they don't have it set out how they want to do it, we make them go through 3 questions. It's one, start in the place where your clients are, so where your listeners should be. So start talking about them, what they're feeling, how they're thinking, what they aspire to do, and what they're struggling with, and then talk about yourself and why you're uniquely suited to deliver it. So it's not your whole story, but enough of the story that they understand why you're relevant, because your story will come out over time. And then the third thing is now that you know what your show sounds like and looks like, you can talk to them, think about the type of people you're going to be interviewing, and you can tell them that. And so
this is awesome.
It lays it out for you. And so we do have an episode in Feed Your Brand about that. So the team will link to that in the blog post for this episode. But that's the reason, because that fear was keeping people back, especially women, from launching the show. So you're not alone in that kind of
and I love that. My clients are going to love that. I have several clients actually kind of on that verge of stepping into doing their podcast that hasn't done it. So this is going to be great for them to go listen to. I can't wait to share that.
I hope I helped you help them then. That's wonderful. Well, good. What about some mistakes? Like there's those hiccups that happen. We forget to turn the record on, like all those things. Did you have something funny, like something disastrous happen when you first started?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've had multiple things that
it still happens.
And we had to re-record one just recently. just a few weeks ago. And it was one of my speakers for my Extraordinary Women Ignite event that was in November. And I was trying to get it launched right before the event. And the sound just, I don't even know what happened with the speaker. There was something really weird that, you'd think that you'd had the sound all figured out, and I got it back and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not going to work. We had to re-record it. So just recently, I have had, I think probably one of it does tie to the sound is one time early on, I did do, how you select which microphone you're on. Well, I didn't do that. And it was an important interview. I mean, I think it was actually one of the Colorado Women Hall of Famers. And, I was actually running the audio off of my computer, which, of course is just not nearly, what you can do with like a good microphone. So, I think that was probably, now I'm diligent about making sure I'm on the right mic.
Even when we check, it's so often it happens, like something goes on and then all of a sudden you realize that it's switched out, or like you just panic. Like I'm always doing that. Like I'll always, like 5 minutes into the interview, I'm like, oh my God, did it switch or something? Let me double check it. And so I'm cognizant of that as well. But I was recently at an Adobe event, and they make, sound editing software. And so they have all of that stuff. And I was at this Adobe event and they were talking about their like future concepts. And so every year they do these like wild future things to see if they're worthwhile. And they have like a big kind of like, it's like a Hollywood reveal, and they have a host. And this year it was John Mahoney, and he was hilarious. And they're putting out these like great little, just these super cool tools and everything. And I'm watching them and thinking to them, one of them was this audio tool that would be, if you had the wrong speaker on, if you had the wrong microphone on, and it was your computer microphone, which has this echoey box sound to it, that you could drop it into their software and it would automatically adjust the level to as good a quality through artificial intelligence fix. So artificial intelligence would go through the entire recording and balance out the sound.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, I was like, I want that because it happens. And so, there is that, like, well, it happens in that first 5 minutes. It sounds so weird. They can make it even. And I was like, I want that. And it took like 5 seconds. It was so fast. Yeah. I was like, and they better do that.
The whole technology, geeking out on technology. I'm like, I never thought I'd be geeking out on technology, but I'm like, I see, like, I did a podcast interview recently. A woman came through our state that was from the Food Network channel, and she wanted to do an interview in a brewery. And so a friend of mine owns a brewery, a gluten-free brewery. And so we went there, but I didn't have the equipment to
do a live in person. Yeah,
exactly. And so one of my really good friends, Toverly, she had the whole get up. And so she came and set it all up. And I'm like, wow, I want all of this.
We're turning into microphone geek girls. I love it. I love it. I love it. So you said you've been at 130 shows.
Yes.
What have you found that it's done for your business success?
It's growing my business in a beautiful way. And it's, I think for me, it's a very much a brand. It's a great brand credibility platform for me. I mean, just because I've gotten to interview just such incredible women. But also it's an expansion for my community, right? Because as I interview, this amazing woman, she shares it in her community. It's bringing more people into my community. So it is definitely expanding my tribe of people, if you will.
And have you seen that happen with your Women's Connect group, with your Extraordinary Women Connect? Have you seen more people show up at the events who've listened to the podcast, who are fans before?
Right. And so my Extraordinary Women Connect events are 3 smaller, more intimate events that I host throughout the year. And then I do a big Keystone event in November every year called Ignite, Extraordinary Women Ignite. And, I grew this year by, probably 50% from last year. And, it's just been a tremendous year. And it was, a lot of these people were coming in that had heard my podcast in some way or another that was their first connection into me. And then they become part of my community. So it's really, it's great.
So what do you do to promote your show? How do you push it out there? How do you, reach out to the community besides just the interviews?
That's a great question, and I think I'm still learning, right? I mean, I truly think that I'm always learning. I'm learning, what works and what doesn't work. But I have a fairly, the process that I do every single week, taking it out to social media, following up with my guests. I think that's a really important piece. Is immediately going back to your guests, saying thank you for being on the show, and here's some memes with I do 3 pearls of wisdom at the end of every interview. And so here's memes with your 3, your each one of your pearls of wisdom. And here's some copy that you can put into a newsletter. And here's, please, post this out on your social channels and go follow, so it's all of that sort of thing. I think the other thing is, leveraging partners like Colorado Women's Hall of Fame has given me a great opportunity for me to, like, when they do their induction ceremonies, I have cards that go to every person that's sitting in that audience that, gets to know about my podcast. I, belong to lots of different groups, like eWomen Network. I belong to, just different women's communities that I'm sharing what my podcast is about. So it's a lot about just being out there, right? Just telling people.
Well, good. Now, have you seen some, I'm going to call it authority increases? So we talk a lot on the show about influence and authority. So influence is the community building and all of those things that you do. And of course that converting into more business and more referrals and other things for you. But authority might be things like you're seeing yourself rank on the first page of Google, or you're getting more press opportunities. Are you seeing more authority happen for you as well? More opportunities for speaking and other things?
Definitely. I mean, I'm definitely getting more opportunities for speaking, and that's fun for me because I love the stage. So that opens up some really nice doors for me. And I think it's just, from an authority perspective, the more you're out there talking to, having interviews with great names, right? It just gives you this line of credibility that
you're having that side by side kind of being seen. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. It's side by side, and it's having real conversations that, we're sharing deep stories. Right. And I think that's part of, it's part of what Extraordinary Women Radio is about. Is not just about, I say, this is not a place for you to tell your signature talk. This is a place for you to come and share your personal life experiences and getting to the success that you've gotten to. And I think that's what makes it different. And to me, that's the part that I love getting into anyway. I mean, I love to hear people's stories.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Well, let's jump into some of our tips that we do. Okay. We do this in every show. So we want to get some lessons and experiences. You can tell stories, whatever you have that might help someone. But we're looking for the best practices and the best ways, and any ways that you've tried something that you thought, wow, that worked really well for me. So what is some of the best ways to book great guests?
It is a lot of asking, right? And then also finding those key partnerships. So I already mentioned Colorado Women's Hall of Fame. I have partnered with Sounds True, who's given me a lot of great. So they're a publisher, and they've given me a lot of great interviews. I've partnered with some podcasting companies that are helping people get on podcast. So one called Interview Connections. And so they've fed me some just really beautiful guests as well. So finding those really key strategic partners, I think is a really good practice, and it's served my business really well.
That's good.
And just asking, after, I mean, I interviewed Lissa Rankin, who came from Sounds True. And after I interviewed Lissa, she was like, "Thank you so much. This was a great interview." And she says, "Who would you love for me to introduce you to?" And I looked at some of her people that she was connected to, and one of them was Sark. And so I know. And I was like, so I saw that. I'm like, "Would you introduce me to Sark?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I totally will introduce you." And so, and by making those kinds of asks, and it just starts to expand.
Absolutely. Love that. What about some best ways to increase listeners?
I think I mean, I need to keep
You'd like
learning
more
that.
listeners,
Yeah,
right?
I'd love to have more listeners. And I think
Okay, listeners, you heard that.
exactly,
Check out Cammy's
come to my
show, right?
show. And I'm one that, I'm constantly watching my numbers. And I think that if we are just out there and we're doing our work and we're speaking and we're sharing and we're building our communities, expanding our communities, I think that's how we grow it. I think, and bring great content that people love to listen to.
I love that. How about producing it in a professional way? How do you produce it so it sounds so good?
Oh, I have a wonderful team.
Thank
my
goodness.
gosh. Yes, exactly. I have a team in Manila, actually, in the Philippines, that does all of my backdoor work. So she's awesome. They do a great job with it. And I think it's essential to have somebody that can do the backdoor stuff, because that is not it's not best use of my time. And it's not my genius, and it's somebody else's genius. And it keeps me doing the things that I'm meant to be doing to grow my business.
That's right. Keeps your voice out there instead of your mind behind the text.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
What about encouraging engagement in that community? So you had already been building a Connect community already. So I'm sure you've brought some of those practices into how you engage with your podcast listeners as well.
Sure. So I always post to my Extraordinary Women Connect group. So on Facebook, I have a group that's called Extraordinary Women Connect. And so those guests get invited into that group, which is really fun because, just that community gets richer and richer the more interviews I'm doing.
I like that. Guests into your groups. Yeah,
right.
Get them in there.
Because then it just gives people a real connection with some of these just amazing people. And then, just being active in that group and inviting people in and, bringing interesting topics and bringing, the episodes in each week. And the feedback that I get is, they're loving what's showing up in those interviews. They're learning from it. It really feels so good with, I did an interview not too long ago with a woman named Monica Shaw, and she's a money person, a money mindset person. And I have had more of my clients and people in my communities go, oh my gosh, that is like I'm learning so much from that person. Right. And so it's when you hit that person that your clients have been wanting to have, there's something that they teach that they're like, oh my God, I so needed this right now. It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so my last tip that we go on is the best ways to monetize your show. But for some people, monetization is alternative. So you can look at that however you look at it as being a successful moneymaker for you.
Right. And it is, I don't monetize with ads. I've thought about it, and it's just not felt like it's enough dollars there to really put that effort and actually, bring that to the show. It feels to me like it doesn't fit within the mix of it. It's my community. And so I take that pride in it's my community. It does monetize on the backside, right? From bringing clients into my business. It does monetize and, expanding my community, bringing them into my events. And, so it does help me build my business from that perspective. So that's how I look at it.
I love that. It's so great. So now your show is unique. It has a sort of unique edge to it, a unique style that you do. I think it's bingeable. So that's always my test of a great show is it bingeable or not? And because the binge listeners are pretty discerning out there. And so it means that you have to bring a lot to the table. What do you think is your sort of unique edge, and what do you nurture as you are doing your interviews and prepping and asking questions?
It's the stories, right? I mean, for me, it's totally the stories. And I've actually, in fact, this week I paused an interview and said, we're not ready to go into this because I really need more of the story behind it. I don't want this just to be a business podcast. And so I paused it. I said, we need to reschedule it because, and so I think it's really important that we know what that, why ours is unique, and then really just honor that and protect that that jewel of what it is, right? So that, it's like, I'm just really adamant about we need to bring the stories in, because when you bring the stories in, it does become bingeable. And I do have clients and friends who listen to the podcast. They'll like get on a road trip and they'll go for hours. Like, I have one client that was working in Kansas, and every time she was driving between Kansas and Colorado, she'd like catch up on all the episodes. And she's like, oh my God, I listened to this episode. And so I love that. It feels really good that just becomes a source of, and I do that. I mean, there's certain podcasts that I listen to that I will totally binge on. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's because everyone has so much stories. There's not even though you do your 3 pearls at the end of each one, it's not formulaic in the rest of the show. Right. And everybody's 3 pearls are totally different every time.
Exactly.
So, so I think that's really what my litmus test is. If I would listen to it and would listen to multiples in a row, and, maybe I wouldn't choose every single one because they weren't relevant to me, but if I'd binge on the majority of them, then this is a sign of a really great show. It's got something going on. And I think part of it, you may not realize how much it is, but a part of it is how much how unprepared your questions appear. So, and I'm sure that there's deep research in that, because it seems like you really know this, but they feel very organically lead to the next question, to the next question. So there isn't any of that. And so that's what I think helps it. So it's like you're drawing out the story, even if you prepped this before. So
thank you. I appreciate
you're welcome. So, before, I'm going to have you do 3 pearls, just because I thought that might be fun to do it on it, and we're here a show that's all about the nitty gritty, right? Because people don't have a lot of time. They want to get to some like success solutions and things like that. And I hope that I get to entice them enough to want to go listen to your show to get you out of the whole process and get something from you. But there's got to be something that you're looking for, amping yourself up and moving it into something for next year. Because we're right at the end of the year. This is going to publish before the end of 2019. And so, thinking about that, do you do content planning? Do you think about who put out a hit list of the great guests you'd like to invite on? Do you do that at the beginning or end of each year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's fun when, when you land those interviews and you sit down and go, and it's a fun dreaming exercise. It's like you sit back and you go, who would I love to have on my show? And one of my very first ones. So when I first started my show, I sat down and wrote down like 20 names. And one of them was a musical group called Rising Appalachia. And I was like, I would love to interview them. It would just be so amazing. And literally I stalked them when they came to town, and and then I finally, and she said yes, and I got her on the show, and it was amazing. So, it pays to dream, right? It's like, who do you really want to have on there?
Well, this is the thing. I think a lot of times when people start it, they're like, who could I interview? It's like, they're asking the wrong question. Instead of who would I love to have, the path is going to happen. You're going to find someone who knows someone who's on your future list? Cause maybe we could make it happen right here.
Oh, this is great. And I'm going to just step back because I think there's a fun story to my 100th episode. Yeah. I literally sat down, I wrote down, okay, who are my ones on my top list that I would love to have in my 100th episode. And I wrote down, I wrote Brene Brown, of course. Who doesn't want to interview Brene Brown, right? And I wrote down Liz Gilbert, and I wrote down Zainab Salbi, who is, do you know who Zainab is?
Yeah.
So she lived in Saddam Hussein's, basically his farm when she was growing up. So, and the story is just incredible. But I wrote her down as one of the women that I would love to have for my 100th episode. And within the week, Tammy Simon at Sounds True reached out to me and said, I know your 100th episode is coming up. How about Zainab Salbi for that?
You're like, the universe made it happen. I'm so excited, right? Yeah.
It was so cool. So for 2020, I would love Brene Brown. I would love Liz Gilbert. I would love Gabby Bernstein. Gabby Bernstein is like top of my list right now. I am so in love with Gabby's books. In fact, I recently reached out to her and got, through the channels and then well, she's not really doing any interviews right now. And I'm like, oh, well, that's just because I'm not going about the right channel. So I'm putting it out there, Gabby Bernstein.
You don't know who's listening. That's right.
Exactly.
it could be happening. So
yes.
I love that. I love that you take time to think that through and do that, because I think that's so important to set a new tone and intention for the next year of content. And because you've been doing this for 3 years, so you have this sense of that is so important as you move forward.
Yes.
So love that. Well, let's do your 3 pearls of wisdom, because I love the idea of having you do that, because you always ask everybody else to do that. So and this is usually how I do end, is I ask for a piece of advice for someone new starting up or thinking about starting up. What would be your 3 pearls of wisdom for them?
One, just jump in, right? I mean, just go do it, because it's so much fun to get out and you're going to have fun with it. You're going to fall in love with it. I mean, I don't know anybody who's podcasting who hasn't fallen in love with it. So I would say just 1, go do it. 2, be really clear about, what your why is behind it, right? Mm-hmm. So that you're creating the kind of show that feeds your soul. And I think, and that's part of the reason why I'm like, and yes, I'm a business coach and I want to talk business, but part of the reason is I don't want to, I'm really clear about, I don't want this to be about signature stories or, your signature talk that you give on stage all the time, because then it just becomes business talk. And so find what your niche is and be really clear with it. And then just really guard that essence, if you will, of what your show stands for. And 3, what's my 3? 3 is just have fun with it. And then I think so much we forget how to have fun. As business people, right? I mean, as entrepreneurs, as business people, it's like we can get caught up in the seriousness of so much of what we do. And if we can just have fun with it and step into it, it's that light is going to come through, and people are going to fall in love with your show, and you're just going to build a wonderful following.
Oh, Cami, thank you so much. I'm so glad you came on the show to share all of your lessons and to share your Extraordinary Women podcast, to the Extraordinary Women radio podcast, to the community here. I really hope you keep going. I hope that there's multiple years more out of you, because there's something special in the way that you draw stories out of people. So.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm not stopping anytime soon. It's
all right.
It is my passion. So thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate it.
Well, everyone who's listening out there, Feed Your Brand Center of Influence. I'm always looking for new podcasters out there. So if you are one, or if you listen to one, you've got to share them with me, because this is both publicity and it's an opportunity for you to learn more. So make sure you reach out to me and let me know. And you can do that at feedyourbrand.co. And you can also do that anywhere on social media at Feed Your Brand. So I look forward to hearing from all of you. And I look forward to bringing you an amazing Center of Influence in podcasting next week. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.